So, Nagarjuna's precious Garland. I went to India oh, for the first time in 1962. 1972. And happened to arrive when the Dalai Lama was about to begin a series of 16 lectures on Tsongkhapa's middle length exposition of the stages of the path, which lasted from 4 to 6 hours every day. And that's okay. I had no faith in the Dalai Lama. I figured he was an appointee of the Tibetan government and considered that much like an appointee of the Canadian Parliament or of the United States Congress. Would you believe in such a person appointed by the Parliament? And I had taught three appointed lamas in New Jersey for 2 or 3 years, and they were nice people, but young fellows, and was not a very gullible person. And I'd met a number of members of the Dalai Lama's family who were all dynamic, but that was about it. Because where else could they come in the United States in the 1960s? There wasn't any other place that they could come to except that one in the flatlands of New Jersey. And so I went, and I had I happened to have had some really good teachers who both in New Jersey. One of them was Geshe Flundrup Serba, known as Sopa in North America, who was #1 in his graduating class as a Geshe. And so he was a national hero. And also Khyentse Langden, who was the abbot of the Tantric College. It was Gyume College, and who was really a grand personage who ended up not just pretty much, as my private tutor first in New Jersey and then in Wisconsin. It's a long story, but anyway, he was really a grand personage. He was #2 in his class in Tibet when he got his Geshe degree. And so when I went to listen to the Dalai Lama's teachings with my Uher reel-to-reel recorder, and I had been studying and practicing for 9 years, I guess, at that point, and knew Tibetan well enough due to those teachers that actually I could understand what he was saying. And had negative faith in him, which is a very good way to start with any teacher. And the first thing I noticed was that he spoke very fast, very clearly, and very loudly. He was very, very loud. He had a speaker system, but he was very loud. And he was very clear and very fast. And I had to pay attention if I was going to, you couldn't wander. Okay. And just very, very slowly, things would come back to me and I'd think, oh, that's interesting. But anyway, the 16 days, 4 to 6 hours a day, I had an audience with him maybe a month later. And somewhere, I'm not sure when it was, whether it's before that audience or after, probably before, there was a much smaller gathering, much smaller gathering, only for Tibetan scholars in the private office complex for a teaching of Nagarjuna's 6 collections of reasoning. And somehow I ended up in that group. And Nagarjuna's 6 collections of reasoning contains Nagarjuna's precious Garland. And I was particularly enthused but by that time, I was impressed by the number of items of His Holiness's teaching that reverberated back in my mind. And my mind was quite clear at that time, so things would reverberate back. Usually small things. And I ended up writing a poem to him in Tibetan of 23 items that kept reverberating back to me. And I was particularly enthused by his social activism take on Nagarjuna's precious Garland. The message that came through to him. And I began translating it along with the commentary by one of Tsongkhapa's students, Gyaltsab Tamarinchen. I didn't translate the commentary, but I used the commentary, and since I had His Holiness, a recording of His Holiness's teaching, I listened to that and began translating the 5 chapters of Nagarjuna's text, and eventually presented it to him. It was a rather funny encounter. It was at some other teaching in that same small, it was really an audience room, but it was cleared out for a lecture room, which was really packed with these scholars, and everyone had left, and I stayed behind and approached where he was still sitting. He had some wrap-up ritual he had to do. And so I approached where he was sitting, and he was a bit put out that somebody would approach where his seat, and it was a rather low seat. And I saw that he looked over to his security, like, what the hell are you doing? Letting some person come up to me like this. And I gave him the translation for this text. And he was still looking to see if somebody was going to notice that this person was there. Not that I hadn't had a few audiences with him in the meantime. But from that I understood that there was a certain protocol that needed to be followed. But still I just stood there. That's kind of funny. They never noticed until I ended up on the veranda leaving. They were used enough to me by then. So I did two translations of it. One that was presented at that time and ended up as the second volume of the Wisdom of Tibet series. And I brought it with me today to warn you not to buy it. And if you have bought it, I apologize to you. It's a little book. And it's it's the one I presented to him. And it's got enough mistakes in it, so I say, don't buy it. The second version eliminates those mistakes and is easy. Also, it's easier to read and probably costs a lot more. I don't know. Oh, somebody knows. It's got the Tibetan text in the back, which I edited. And it's got Gyaltsab's outline on the right side of the page, whereas the outline is in the back of the book and it's very hard to make use of it. It's got the outline right next to it over here, so you can follow the Tibetan outline very easily. And of course, if you don't read Tibetan, you don't have to have the outline. And a whole lot of textual emendations that I made that you don't need either. I don't know what it does cost nowadays. $26.95 back when it first came out. So please don't buy this one. I, in fact, was so fed up with the mistakes in it. There aren't many mistakes, but the real horror of this one is that it was, my second publication. And it first came out in England. And the English editor was a distinguished old gent for, the publisher, a highly distinguished publisher in England. I'm just not blocking it, I'm just not recalling it right now. And it came out in America at another distinguished house, Harper and Row. And because this is written in so-called poetry, but as you said, it's a loose, informal style of poetry, he wanted to put it in some formal poetry, which in his version, he wanted a certain count of syllables in 2 lines, first and fourth, or first and second, first and third, and the other 2 lines would have a different number of syllables. So if it was, Nagarjuna gives lists of important topics. So he would shift the order of the topics in order to get the right number of syllables. But given that it was my second book, way back in the 1970s, I had no power. If it was going to be published, it had to go through this editor. Otherwise, he'd wash his hands of it, and it wasn't going to be published. And actually, I made the smart decision to let him do it his way. It turned out to be smart, because you got two very important publishing houses. And people thought, oh, wow, this is really fantastic. This young guy has got these two important publishers. And actually, it was Arthur Link at UBC who approved the publishing at Harper and Row. And it was before I knew Arthur Link, who came to the University of Wisconsin, where I was getting my after my PhD, and we got to be good friends. Actually, he wanted to hire me here, but I got a better offer at the University of Virginia based on these two books. But then I got a chance to put it back in the original order and to look at the one commentary, only one commentary done in India by Ajita Mitra, and then also to look at a translation done much later by John Dunn and Sarah McClintock, which they sent to me, and I found 6 serious, well, to my mind, 6 serious errors. So I took this one out to my burning place in Virginia, but I couldn't burn a book. So I've got a couple copies in Virginia, and fortunately Betsy Knapper, who lives next door to me, had a copy, because actually I wanted to check something in it today, and I also wanted to bring a copy to tell you not to buy it. All right, enough of the history. It's a great book. Chandrakirti, who is so famous for his teaching of the consequence school, refers to it a great deal. This book, Nagarjuna's Precious Garland, is included in the collections of reasonings because it includes so many reasonings. In another way, it's included in Nagarjuna's collections of advice because it includes a great deal of advice on how to live one's life within cyclic existence. So it includes a lot about how to get out of cyclic existence, includes a lot about how to live within cyclic existence. So it's included in 2 different collections. So sometimes it's said there are 5 collections of reasonings, and sometimes it's said that there are 6. Another time. Okay. Enough preamble. Otherwise you'll get sick of the preamble, and my good friend over here is already closing his eyes. You have to feed him with substance. Okay, I wrote a long introduction to this, doing 2 things. One, which we'll not go through except to make one mention, which is very important. The first chapter in the introduction is about Nagarjuna's life, which is traced in Great Vehicle Sutras from way, way back. And the import in this is to show the importance of individuals over a long period of time, and the importance of our intentions, of our wishes, of making wishes, of individuals who weren't important even a very long time ago, but say even within this particular lifetime, of making a wish to help others. When you have no power, when you have no power, of wishing to help others, and of that bearing fruit later. It's simply that. There's a lot of talk about how individuals don't mean much in Asian society. And this is a great example about the importance of an individual and serving as a model for every individual, and how important it is for each one of us to develop intentions to help others when you have no power, and to maintain those wishes over long periods of time. Now, those long periods of time start whenever you start the wish and maintain the wish. So Nagarjuna has a great deal to say about the power of wishes that have to do with love, compassion, and, otherism, altruism. Alter means other. It's just a Latinesque word for otherism. So the story is told in a great many sutras, whether Nagarjuna himself wrote the sutras or whether Buddha spoke the sutras. To me, it doesn't make any difference. The intent is to tell about the importance of intention, of individual person's intention. That intention is like magic. The magic of removing barriers. So that means that ill intentions create barriers. So it's a great story. And, fortunately, Jaya Sheba around 1700 looked at all of these sources, and it was a huge, well, I'm praising myself. I looked at all of what he was looking at and plotted through all of this. And in some ways, it's boring to look at all of it. But in another way, if you keep it in mind what it's saying and the import of what it's saying, you get more and more reinforcement. And if you get tired of reading, all of this seemingly academic stuff that I put in this first chapter about the biography, keep in mind the last few paragraphs, or just read the last few paragraphs of that first chapter that tells Nagarjuna's biography. It's really an amazing, inspirational story of an individual that's meant to inspire us individually. And what's the inspiration? It's the intent that it begins with. That in the presence of some Buddha, who's, he's like passing by, and he's got an intention to help. And he didn't yell it out to that Buddha who was there, just got enthused. It's lovely. Okay, then what I did, the reason why I put together these so-called introductory chapters is that, I attended this teaching and I was really enthused by what the Dalai Lama had to say in terms of social activism. He didn't use words like social activism. He was just giving commentary on these stanzas. And Nagarjuna has a lot to say about how we should lead our lives. And there's this stanza and that stanza and so forth. And I translated it and I was reading the commentary and, I had to go over it and over it and over it. And, at the end of it, I was thinking, well, he didn't say too much about compassion. And then I went through it just looking for where he talked about compassion. And I realized, there's a lot about compassion. So then I began putting together what he said by topic. Not, he put it together by chapter. I put it together by topic in the so-called introduction. So all I did was rearrange what he said. Now, I'm not claiming that I put it together in a better way. But what I'm doing is, what I did was to put it together by way of 4 topics. 4 topics? I forget how many chapters there are in the introduction. Anyway, doesn't matter. So, advice for living. This means living in cyclic existence. Advice for liberation, and if I were better prepared, I'd tell you what the rest of the topics, there's something about all the places where he talks about compassion. So I pulled from here, pulled from there, and that makes it easy, I hope, easier to read the book. I'm not claiming it's better. I'm not claiming I've got some better order that he should have done the book this way, all right? I did this just because the message of his book, despite all the work I'd done on it, didn't come through to me. So if you buy the book, I'm always giving these chats to encourage you to buy the book. Maybe usually I say I might get 50 cents. Maybe I'll get 75 cents for this book, because Nagarjuna's not around. His Holiness doesn't get any share on this one because I don't have his commentary in this. So maybe I'll get 75 cents. Actually not. Not because Sidney Pyburn, who was half owner of Snowline, was living in his car. He lost his apartment. He's living in his car. And at some point they asked me if, I was getting 7% of the sales. You can figure it out, $26.95 of the sale price. That'd be $2 and 10% it'd be, so not bad. But it was cut down. They asked me to cut down, I think it was something like 2%. So then when they sold out to Shambhala, the contracts remained the same. So I don't know, you figure whatever 2% is, 26.95.
Sounds like Elvis.
Yeah, but that's fine, because they're keeping my books in print, so it gives them all the more reason. 2%? I don't know what that is. Oh yeah? Oh, okay. So 50 cents. So you can see I'm not hawking it to make money. So, in this advice for living doesn't mean that if you get liberated, the third chapter is about advice for liberation. Doesn't mean that if you get liberated, you're dead. You can still be alive. All right? I noticed that. Advice for living, then the next chapter is advice for liberation. Then it's all over, you're liberated. Like you're not alive. I could give the wrong idea. Living and liberated should be the third. So here in stanzas 141 and 142, he warns you, he warns the king. You see, this is written for a king. And he says that when you're writing to a king, usually you're afraid of the king. So you want to say nice things to the king. Like when people come to see Trump, they're smiling and say, what a great job you've done, and it couldn't have been done without you, and you're really nice, because they don't want him to piss on them, right? But what Nagarjuna says is, that's how things usually are, but I'm going to slap the shit out of you. I'm going to tell you as it is. So he says, though unpleasant, are beneficial. I'm going to tell you what's unpleasant, but beneficial. A friend was on the phone the other day who said it had cancer. And he said he started drinking again. And I said, you're an asshole. And both of us have another friend who was drinking like crazy. And I said, call him up. He's a friend of both of us. And I said, you tell him that he's an asshole. So anyway, that's the, So he says, rare are helpful speakers. To find it somebody who's speaking and they're helpful, that's rare. Listeners are very rare. But rarer still are those who act at once on words that, though unpleasant, are beneficial. In other words, you tell him he's an asshole and he stops drinking. Yeah. So Nagarjuna says, I'm going to tell you things that are unpleasant. Act on it quickly. So a doctor gives you something unpleasant to drink. It's dreadful. But the doctor cares about you. That's why the doctor gives you. It's hard to do, right? He's a psychologist. That's really hard to do, to say, you have to. To get somebody, I really felt that my friend would take it. He was really happy when I told him he was an asshole. So I knew I could say that to him. And I knew that the two of us together could say it to the other guy. At least I hope so. So then he says, monarchs, presidents, whatever, who do things against the practices are senseless, but they're mostly praised by their citizens. Why? Because it's hard to know what they'll tolerate, right? Otherwise, they'll bear down on you. So it's hard to know what to say to them. That's really cool stuff. So it's hard for me, Nagarjuna says to the king, to know what to say to you. But because I like you, and because I have compassion for everyone, I'm going to tell you without hesitation what's useful but unpleasant. Now, what I'm going to tell you is not just for monarchs, presidents, prime ministers, but are taught for a wish to help other sentient beings. They're taught for everybody. So this is for a king. He is a king in his area in India, but they're for everybody. So there are things that are specifically set forth in terms of a male also. But then when he finishes it, he says, transpose this for women. Turn it around and take it for women. There are some specifically sexist things in it that are, you have to hold your nose in, nevertheless. So he says you're going to have to do some things that are going to make you suffer, that are going to bring pain to you, but they're going to help in the future. And this is the policy that was handed down to us from the past, from the ancients. So you're going to have to relinquish some small pleasures, but they'll bring happiness later, something greater later. The resolute should relinquish small pleasures. God, I just got some chocolate today. He made a joke and said, these are nice. Actually, they're called nice. And he said they're nice. I thought, I got to try these. He says if such things can't be borne, if you can't stand them, then doctors giving distasteful medicines would disappear. So there's repetition. My great teacher who came out to Wisconsin was not afraid of repetition. Sometimes he repeated things so much that I felt I was like a sausage casing being stuffed with what do you call the insides of sausage? Ugh. But then I figured, okay, I'm being stuffed again. What's he going to say? I knew he was going to stuff me again with the same old junk. But then what's that junk he's going to stuff me with? So I would try to think in Tibetan, what's he going to say? And that's when I really learned it. And so then I would test myself to see if I got it right. And that stuff is what I'm working from now. He didn't teach me this, but of course, stanzas from this text came up. Sometimes what is thought to be harmful is regarded as helpful by the wise. You could almost teach anybody anything then. You have to beware. Somebody's slapping the shit out of you. Says, I'm really trying to help you. Somebody's blowing their top at you and they're saying, I'm really helping you. I don't know about that. And then he says something that is brought up a lot when teaching philosophy. General rules and their exceptions are commended in all treatises. So you see, you get a definition, and then somebody points out an exception. And then they haul out this and say, even Nagarjuna said that there are exceptions to everything. Oh, Buddha said that students are to be told the truth, gentle, meaningful, and salutary. But you just said you're to be told even what's difficult. Now you're saying it's gentle, it's meaningful, and salutary, healthy. At the proper time and from compassion. You get mixed up. Ladi Rinpoche, you see, how did I check the translation? When I forgot the words in Tibetan, I took the English to Ladi Rinpoche. Ladi Rinpoche's name is Ladi Jonchuk Sotrim. We all knew him as Ladi Rinpoche. So then I took the English to him, and I translated it back into Tibetan, once I had forgotten the Tibetan. Otherwise, when I remembered it, it would be useless to translate it back and to have him say, oh yeah, that's good. He didn't know any English, especially back in the 70s. At one point, I don't know where it is, it must be in here, Nagarjuna said, don't say what hurts. And he said, mostly. When true words are spoken without belligerence, this is for certain, even if you're going to say what hurts, you can't say it with belligerence. Can you do that? I have a hard time with it. If you're going to say what hurts, do you get worked up? I usually find that I get worked up. They should be taken, those true words, as fit to be heard, like water fit for bathing. That's good for the listener. I've tried to work on that. When I was in my 20s, I felt I should never get married, have children, because I get worked up too easily. Look at this. This is his advice, how to live. One has to work on that, right? I don't know, I do. One of my friends told me she came out of an operation, actually. They were removing both breasts. She was coming out of the operation, and she said she works in politics in D.C., and she was imagining conducting war with cannons and tanks and, just attack. She said, that isn't me. That wasn't me. I said, oh. I thought to myself, oh, you should listen to your own language. And it wasn't the time to point that out. I saved it for later. Realize that I am telling you what is useful here and otherwise, and for later lives. Nagarjuna must have been a cool cat. Of course, he was writing it. A little easier to write it. Like sending an email. Act on it so as to help yourself and also others. Helping yourself and also others. Help yourself and also others. That theme comes up a lot. When you help others, you're helping yourself also. Best way to help yourself is to help others. So at the very end of the poem, stanzas 491 through the beginning of 493. Nagarjuna points out that some people are worried about relying on what he means is a guru. If they relied on somebody else who has purity, love, and intelligence, and relied on somebody who has helpful and appropriate speech. A lot of people who hold themselves back. You know, well, that person is really nice and is really helpful, but I'm not going to get involved in that. If somebody has qualms about this, then they're causing their own interests to be destroyed. So he says you should know the qualification. So, hey, obviously I'm not putting myself forward. I'm just relating what a text says. I'm not qualified. You should know in brief the qualifications of spiritual guides. So then he says something about the qualifications. If you are taught by those knowing contentment, so that means they're not greedy. You know, like, bring me money, give me sex, etc. And having compassion and ethics, as well as wisdom that can drive out your afflictive emotions. You should realize what they teach and respect them. So quite the opposite from having qualms about relying on them. I'm not going to rely on anybody, that kind of thought. It's risky. His Holiness says, take even 12 years to investigate somebody you're going to rely on. 12 years is a lot. A person might die in that time. Oh my gosh. And now we have 3 minutes. I typed this out so it'll be in bigger print. Not, I didn't type it out. I reformatted it. So, any reflections?
I know the Sanskrit title of this text, Precious Garland, is Ratnavali.
Yeah.
What is the Tibetan title?
Rinchen Trema. Rinchen means
Oh,
precious.
Trenga.
Big price in a way. Precious. Rin means price, really, value. Chen is big. Trema means garland. Gyobo of Tamchao. Tamchao means advice to the king. There's some difference of opinion on which king and so forth. I looked at my my own note today to see a couple prominent opinions, and I don't know much about that, about the kings. See you then.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.